Christian. We'll deal with this later. Uh, Actually, it's amazing, but the Bible definition of faith is
Mhm.
trust.
Mhm.
But it has been the idea of trust has been discarded in modern Christianity because
Right.
the
Mhm.
word trust the word trust demands another question, which is trust in what?
Mhm.
You have to have what are you trusting in? And the Christians really have no answer for that. They don't know what they're trusting in. They're just trusting in that God, everything's going to work out wonderfully because they're Christians. Whereas the Bible definition of faith uh, means that we are putting our faith in a promise or a word or some communication with the Almighty God. Somehow He has made us a promise, said something to us, given us instruction, and we put faith in that. That little ingredient in faith is totally devoid of Christian thinking today because God has become a book to a Christian. So they read in the
Mhm.
Bible, I would that you prosper and be in good health. So let's put faith in that we're all going to be happy and healthy and wealthy and wise. And you're not allowed to do that. One is not allowed to do that. And so faith has been, if you were to take the the conventional idea of faith today and put a word to it as a definition, it is nothing more than hope. I hope everything works out. I hope everything's good.
Mhm.
Um, and and one of the goals that I have in my ministry is to get across to people that you need communication with an incorporeal God, a transcendent being, in order to have faith. And so naturally, I want to know where you stand on that.
Okay,
But
Okay.
I would
okay,
have been
listen,
shocked
everybody. Hold on,
otherwise.
hold on, hold on, hold on. Okay, look, we got to take a break, and
Hmm.
I want to say before we go to the break, all of you who are out there watching on WyleanerTVShow.com, want to apologize to you for the technical difficulty. The show is just now becoming visible to those of you who are trying to watch out there on WyleanerTVShow.com. And I hope we didn't lose you. I hope you came back to see and kept trying. But initially, the show did not go on as planned on the visual portion. So right now, it is visual on WyleanerTVShow.com. And so we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll be finishing up with some more questions. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. We're back. Having a little trouble hearing what's going on there in the radio station, but I'm assuming that that commercial is over. Anyway, we're back, and we were in the middle of asking a question here, and the question they're actually in the middle of that discussion of that question. So, Margaret, I believe, Dr. Johnston, I believe that it was up to you to move forward with your discussion as well. So you may continue.
Okay, well, I'll take up the word trust again. I would like to point out that the trust, when you say Christians, you use the word loosely, trust that God will take care of them in this life, that bad things won't happen to them, that, they'll get what they prayed for, it's not going to rain on their picnic, or, Aunt Sadie will get better, even though she's very ill. So those kind of things, I don't think that's the trust. we're talking about. I think trust is something much bigger, like that you trust that even when the bad things happen, that it's not just about you. I mean, there's a bigger picture going on, and what happens to you is not so terribly important. It has to do with that diminution of self that happens at these later stages, where you see you're part of everything and you're part of all of the universe. So if a bad thing happens to you personally, it's like not such a big deal. It's, you accept it. It's like, oh well. The point is, it's about the bigger picture.
Again, you're preaching the sermons of Christ. He taught us to deny ourselves. He taught us that it's not all about you, and I think in doing so, he was not just telling us, if you don't do this, that you're going to hell. He was saying, I believe he was teaching us these things in order for our lives to be more pleasant, and I'm afraid that he and you are agreeing on this.
So that's my point, Don. So I can say that without taking from the authority of Christ. Excuse me if I sound overly proud or whatever. He's not the only one. It seems to me that most religions lead you in this direction if you really get to the upper levels of them, and therefore
Yes.
Christianity is wonderful if it leads you to this point. But if it leads you into the literalist, punishment and hell type
Yes.
of viewpoint, then it's not helping you like it should.
Yes. Well, I just think that I don't know if you know anything about of where I come from as far as my particular qualifications. I don't claim to have any other than the fact that I'm a living, breathing human being that has the ability of adding 2 plus 2, and I certainly can add up the Trinity and come up with a different sum than most. But the truth is that I saw what you see, and I was headed straight for it. I was perfectly willing to become an atheist rather than to believe the fairy tales and such, and the circular reasoning and the ridiculous so-called evidences and proofs of God and all the stuff that, well, frankly, you'd have to be in some pitiful condition, whether that's idiocy or whether your life is just a mess and you need help. I don't know, but it just seems that thinking people were turning away from Christianity in crowds, and I was willing to go that way, but there was something about within myself that I just refuse to believe that God is as ridiculous as Pastor Blowhard down the corner in that box with a cross on top. I just refuse to believe that he was that ridiculous. And I was very pleased to find that he was indeed much more than I ever thought that he was. But I can't force that on you or anybody else and say that this is the way you must believe it or see it, which makes me sort of a lonely guy.
Oh.
Okay, listen, everybody. We need to move on. Y'all just seem to be kind of just chilling a little bit there. So we need to go ahead and move on to the next question. And the next question is going to be, because we're going to take another break in about 5 minutes. So let's move on. Okay, it looks like we took a break. It looks like we took a break right there, and wasn't ready to take it, but my producer put it on anyway. So I was trying to tell everybody we was going to take a break in 5 minutes. But now that we've taken that break, I guess we'll move on, and we won't take any more breaks for today until it's time to go home. So let's finish up with these questions here. Dr. Johnston, back to asking you questions, okay?
Fine.
How can one have faith in God by empirical evidence?
So that, Don, sounds to me like a question for a strict rationalist, a strict humanist or secular humanist. However, although I feel like I straddle the line between this rational, what I call the rational stage, people who have reasoned themselves out of belief, and the next stage, which in my book I called the mystic stage, perhaps not the best name. But I feel like I straddle the line. So I can see the beauty in finding connections beyond, and I can see that you can't rely strictly on empirical evidence to find truth, because there are things that are not subject to empirical investigation. And so I do believe it takes a growth step to learn to get beyond the strictly rational, strictly conscience-based, science-based type of reasoning, and see something more paradoxical and more, more inclusive. So I don't rely strictly on empirical evidence, and I don't think that brings us to truth entirely. It brings us to some truths, but not full truth.
Sure.
Discussion?
I think the next question deals with what I'd like to know is the difference between humanism, secular humanism. Wyleaner has the question, I think.
Okay, so let me go ahead and address that question, ask that question, and then you guys can have your discussion from this next question, which I sort of felt that way anyway. Okay, so the next question, Dr. Johnston, is what is the difference between a humanist and a secular humanist? So after you answer that question, Dr. Johnston, then I'm just going to go ahead and say discussion right now, and the two of you can go ahead and go into your discussion after you answer the question.
Okay, so I guess a secular humanist is more firmly entrenched in that mechanistic secular world, the scientific investigation and human reason as the ultimate good. And I think the regular humanists, or like I belong to the ethical humanists, and again, I am not exactly 100%, in agreement with them either, but I think they're kind of softer. A story, I'll just tell you a funny story. When I first started on my writing this book and starting to talk in places, give talks, one of the first talks I gave was to secular humanists who I thought were kind of like my people. I thought they would just be really excited about this information. But they were not ready to hear anything about any types of connection that weren't something you could see and measure. They were very hostile to the thought. Not really hostile. They were very polite, but you could tell that they were just got riled up about this. And they started saying, "Oh, well, that's because she's a religious humanist." So they kind of draw this line. we don't call ourselves religious humanists. It's more ethical humanists. But they saw that little trend of weakening of that scientific worldview, and they were going to just dismiss me entirely because no, that doesn't work. If it's not hard, cold science and reason, they don't want to hear about it.
This is a new venture for me. I didn't even know that kind of reasoning exists. It might have hindered my return to a God because that appeals to me. Had I known that there was something like a non-secular humanist, but the idea of that man's good is the ultimate authority or power or the hope for mankind. But because I never really bought into that. Does the ethereal or mystical or I forgot the word that you wanted to avoid there, but do the things that cannot be explained with empirical evidence is there a mystical side to what you teach people? Is the hope that you offer people, is it dependent at all upon a mystical experience? I'm wondering.
Okay, I am not a clergy person. I don't preach. I write, and so I don't hold
Sure.
myself up as an authority. In my book, and the one I'm writing now, I pose questions like, did you know this was around, and would you consider this as part of your truth? But I'm not preaching answers, to anyone.
Sure.
So then you ask me, is there a mystical anything in what I'm... So as I understand it, people who move to this, what we might call post-critical faith, or what I called in my book the mystics level, or what I learned later, I was taken to task by a Unitarian minister, I believe. He said, you should have used the word universal or unitive stage instead of mystic stage. But what I understand is that one of the things that leads people beyond the rational stage, the scientific only and human reason only stage, what leads them beyond is possibly experiences of unitive consciousness, or you might say an direct experience of the divine, might bring them forward. And so, yes, in that sense, there is a mystical element to it, but it's also much more practical than that. I do believe that getting to that level requires that larger vision that it's bigger than me, and I'm going to, connect with the largest part of the existence, the largest part of the universe that I can. So it's not just my group, it's not just my family, it's all people, and then it's all animals, and then it's ecology, and then it's, okay, I also accept the existence of these unseen connections in the world. And if you want to call that mystical, you can. It's not necessarily a transcendent external being that that I think at this level people are looking for. I think it's more something maybe more imminent, like we're all a part of God, or whatever you want to use the word. Don't have to use the word God. Mm-hmm. We're all part of the same. We're all connected. We're all one. If you want to talk about, it sounds like Buddhism when you say that, but really, I think the upper levels of all religions lead people towards that type of unitive worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, listen, guys. I'm thinking, we only have just a few minutes left here in the show, and we didn't ask the callers if they wanted to get involved at all. And having a little technical difficulty at the very beginning of the show didn't help much because people didn't get a chance to see the very beginning of the show, and so I'm very sorry about that. I really hate that much. But anyway, we'd like to go ahead and give anyone an opportunity to call in and ask a question if you like, and you will not be on the air with that question. You'll give that question to the producer, and then he'll get the question to me, and I'll try to ask it before we go off the air. So the number is 702 locally, 702-650-5588. That's 702-650-5588. And long distance, 1-800-366-8883. That's 1-800-366-8883. If you want to try to call in right now, and I mean like right now, and ask your question, and he will get that question to me right away. Okay, so meanwhile, let's go ahead and move to the next question, you guys. Let's see here. Dr. Johnston, what is the difference between a human... Oh, no, we did that. Okay. Quote from your webpage. The truth spiritual development delivers is one that works for all people. How it is, truth works for all people. So I think that's how is it that truth works for all people, Dr. Johnston?
Well, I don't remember putting that on my website, but I'm sure it's there. I think what I meant was that you can go through the stages that I described. Again, they're not based on my authority. They're the work of many people more spiritually connected than I, or more academic than I. But the stages work in any religion. So whether you're talking about Buddhists or Christians or Hindus or Muslims or even Jewish people, I suppose, you can go through these stages and still wind up at that sort of unitive worldview, that type of universal connection. And so it's important to realize that you could be at any religion in any one of these stages. It's not like one religion has superior knowledge than another.
Okay, discussion. Discussion.
I guess the I naturally go toward. I have to admit that when I laid out these questions, I felt like I was going to be dealing with someone more secular humanist than what I'm finding. And one of my complaints about the idea that we all come from God, or God is in us, or God is all around us, or and just kind of downsizing or upsizing God, whatever they're doing to make him fit into their life more comfortably. The truth is that we have postmen that say God telling him to kill people, and riding around and killing people because God tells him to. And with I'm saying this is what he asserts, and so we have people who, under the guise of being led of God, do some pretty horrible things in the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have sort of painted God on every wall in our life, it's really difficult to argue the point that, well, maybe perhaps God did say that. We all know God didn't say that. No being that could be labeled as good would have instructed someone to have done something horrible. So I'm just curious that when we do place God in that big sense that the humanist tends to place him, is there, can we concede to some basic rules that this, we can't really step over this, or we can't, because in my world of belief, I have the commandments that keep those kind of. If you get off the trail too far, you run into these guardrails called commandments. Don't do this, and which, if commandments were a part of the fellow who had the dogs talking to him, or saying it was God or whatever, he would have run straight into "Thou shalt do no murder," and so I'm wondering, where are the guardrails when we make God available to everyone in whatever way they tend to create for him?
Good question. Okay, I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, you have like 30 seconds to answer that question.
Oh, no.
It's a huge question, Wyleaner. I can't do it in 30 seconds. It's huge, but it's very important.
Okay, go for it. Do the best you can. I'll let you go as long as I can.
Okay, at the literal level of belief, that's what I call the faithful level, the typical religious believer, their authority, what they base their authority on, is the rules of their religion, and they need those rules, and they're actually very good that they have those rules. At the rational level, the next level up, people become more conscience-based, and so even if their church tells them something that doesn't make sense, they feel free to break that rule, because their authority comes from their conscience. At the last level, at the mystic level, their conscience, what they base their behavior upon is a spirit authority. So they're not going to go killing people, and they're not going to go lie, cheat, or steal, because it comes from somewhere else. It's sort of part of them and part of not part of them, but it's a spirit authority, and it's absolute.
Okay, listen. The music has begun, and that's our cue that the time is about up, okay? And so I'm going to give both of you 30 seconds for a closing thought, and we got to be out of here. So ladies first, Margaret, 30 seconds, closing thought.
Closing statement. That literal dogmatic religions depend on provincial insular societies to survive. And with the types and amount of communication and interactions we have today among people of various cultures and religions, those absolutist literal meanings are not going to survive in the long run. The more open our understandings and the more metaphorical our interpretations, the better religions will survive into the future. They will tend to endure as rich traditions to be celebrated. Okay.
Okay, Don?
I relinquish my time. She can finish her thought. It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
They will, thank you, Don. They will endure as rich traditions to be celebrated instead of rigid belief systems to which we must convert others. The future of religion, I believe, will be based on an open-ended type of faith, based on mutual trust and connection, as opposed to outmoded literal beliefs.
Okay, listen, everybody. Thank you so much. I appreciate the two of you. I appreciate everybody that tuned in out there on WyleanerTVShow.com. We got to get out of here. Y'all know who I am. I'm Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of the Gospel, and we'll see you next week when the rubber meets the road. See you next week.
Thank you.
All right.